from the RDI crew, Alexis Neve. Sorry, Alexis, I tumbled on your last name. That's probably how I spell it when I type it out too, is like backspace, backspace, backspace. Alexis is our operations manager at RDI, and she is here to be the Zoom goddess because, as I mentioned last week, Jimena is on her way actually to Ontario to see a number of you in person. I also am currently sitting in Boise, Zooming in from my mom's house. And so last week, I think I was in a hotel. Today, I'm in my mom's house. And again, ask for some grace if we have some internet issues as we get through. So, Alexis, thanks for being here today. It's always helpful having somebody to do the breakout rooms and record. So, all right, session 3 for Ready, Set, Grant. Today, we are talking about finding funders, which is probably the hottest topic right now, is how to find those funders. And I'm excited to get you through kind of describing what types of funders there are and where we find them. So let us know if you have any questions from session 2. Happy to answer anything. If anything comes up in the chat, Alexis, would you make sure to interrupt me?
Yep.
For those of you, please stay muted while you're not speaking, just because we do have a pretty large group coming in. And then if you have something to write on, or if you've printed the materials that we sent you, just somewhere to take notes as questions come up or to help complete the exercises. We, again, will not have, like previous classes, sessions, we won't have a break, so take care of yourself. And take care of yourself, be open. Here are group norms, give some virtual kindness and grace, particularly with people who might be, in a rural space and not have access to good internet. RDI value, as you all know, is we start on time and end on time. So we will be here for the 2 hours. Maybe we'll end early today. Who knows? All right. So what are we going to cover today? We're going to talk about, like I alluded to, types of funders, how to do funder research, and funder relationships, building authentic relationships with them. So questions to you all is, did you work on your project budget or organizational budget since our last session? I saw a thumbs up from David. If you are still working on that, great. Know that this is just work to help you get through some of these new terms for you, some of this getting you prepared for that next grant request. Is there a gap where you are? Does anybody want to share what you're working on for your budget?
I guess one thing that came up for me was, what about a balance sheet? We got budgets, but then they should land on a balance sheet that you can carry from year to year and be able to present that to people as well.
Yeah, that's a really good question, David. And we don't talk about the accounting side of nonprofits in this class, but if you're fortunate enough to have an accountant or a volunteer accountant for your group, David is just talking about, like, how does your organization balance through financially throughout the years, and how does your organizational budget or your project budget play with that? Really great question and comment. And as you're exploring the financial side of being a nonprofit, of looking for grants, I'd encourage you, if you have questions, to use the Kelly Nonprofit Technical Assistance and one-on-one mentoring to learn more about that. Any
Uh,
other?
yeah, one quick question. In
Yeah.
doing these budgets that we're working on, I guess I'm asking, and maybe I don't know if someone else is struggling with that question also. The budgets we're making should they be realistic, or should they be something we're just finagling with, like maybe just um a fake budget, maybe I should
Hmm.
say.
Really good
Just
question. How I'd answer that for you is whatever's going to be most helpful to you. So you may be working on an actual your nonprofit or your work might be working on an actual project that you're looking to get a grant for. And so I would encourage you to look at it as a realistic budget. What are you actually doing? But if you're in that space of either you don't have access to that in your in your organization, you're a new nonprofit and you're just figuring out how to do these things, um, maybe you think of not necessarily a fake budget, but what is a project or or a program or capital campaign that you might be doing in the future. Does that help you, Audrey? So the short answer is yes to
Yes.
both.
Yeah, it does help. Thank you.
You're
Yeah.
welcome.
Okay.
And Christine,
Yeah, David.
I'd suggest too that people consider doing, a bare bones budget. None of our grants came through. A medium budget, oh yeah, we got some reasonable things. And then the angel funder budget, what would we do if
Right.
it was not an issue?
Yeah. What happens when Mr. Moneybags comes in with that $20,000 check? That angel funder, like you're talking about. Really good approach, especially when you are in the real world working on those budgets is like what is the bare bones? What is when some comes in and when all of it is funded? So we are going to talk about where are the places, good places to find funders, the different types of funders. Um, and if you are well connected in your community or your field or your region, or have some really good experience with funders, you can really help out today by providing additional advice and suggestions where to find funding and types of funding and how to build partnerships with them. So I rely on all of you to help your cohort members. I've already gotten some suggestions and emails that we'll bring up later today. So here we go. We're here. Let's talk about finding funders, the types of funders, excuse me. So generally, there are lots of different types of funds out there. So we're going to talk about the different grant opportunities you might research. And what this slide outlines is public funding opportunities, including government grants, which can be broken into federal and local government. We provided this as a handout in your session reminder email this week. So if you have that pulled up, and if you didn't get that, I know we had some email issues this week with a couple people. So if you didn't get that, please let us know in the chat and Alexis will get that sent to you. So what you see on here is at the first, these are government type grants. You have federal and local and state. The federal grants, remember that very first session when we talked about the UEI number, that's where you're going to need it, is grants require registration with UEI, grants.gov, login.gov, and the SAM registration. And excuse me. Um, there we go. I'll make my slide just a little bit bigger. Typically, this is really significant funding for effective proven programs. Typically, we are in a ever-changing typical grant funding year on the government federal side. And so I say this a little bit cautiously, but these will look like the National Endowment of the Arts or the rural community development initiatives, those types of grants. These are big, significant dollars. And I encourage you to be thoughtful, really thoughtful about if you're going to go after a federal grant, if you've never gone after one before, if you have a small organization. These may not necessarily be the best grants to be dedicating your time and energy into because they are competitive. They have high amounts of restrictions or red tape, and they have high amounts of post-award work that has to be done. What post-award work means is after you've gotten the award, all of the reporting that you have to do throughout. Many of them require quarterly reporting instead of one report at the very end. And very intense moments or intense details that you have to send in. So then you have the flip side of that of our government grants, which are the local and state, and these come from city and county departments. They re-grant portions of their annual allocated funds to specific issues. So this could be like the Oregon Youth Development Council or the Oregon Department of Education. They have funding that is then refunded out specifically to Oregon places. Um, the interesting piece on this one is it's not necessarily invite only, but they're usually announced via email to partner organizations or people they've worked with in the past. So another type of, I'm going to pause there and see if there's any questions about government, not the foundation public, but the government grants before I move on.
Um, can you maybe suggest a way of getting connected with some of the local and state
Mhm. Yeah.
grant opportunities?
What I would suggest is actually, I'm not going to answer that question right now, Audrey. I'm going to answer that question in the second half of today. Is that okay? Can you wait that long?
I can wait.
All right.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Such a good question. And you know that you've built the slide deck right, or you built the training right when somebody asks a question that you're going to answer in the future. And so I appreciate that. Okay, so I'm going to move on into the this other piece of public funding opportunities and the public foundation. And the next slide, we'll talk about private, and that's usually where a number of you will be looking at for funding. But public charities are distinguished primarily by the level of public involvement in their activities. Public charities generally receive a greater portion of their financial support from the general public or government units and have greater interaction. This looks like the Oregon Community Foundation, United Way, Black United Fund of Oregon. They are 501(c)(3)s. They are supported by multiple sources, public donation, other foundations, and has a board or staff structure to help them determine where those funds go. And they're very typically very specific on an issue or a population or geography. And sometimes will operate their own programs in addition to grant making. So this could look like capacity building, like nonprofit executive director leadership training. Or I'm thinking of the Idaho Community Foundation. They launch a number of these programs that are specific to supporting Idaho nonprofits. Oregon Community Foundation also has a number of programs outside of just giving funds, and I use just word very lightly. What I would say, particularly when it comes to government funding or public foundation funding, is to start small. It may not be worth your time and effort to jump into a $500,000 federal request or state request if it's your first grant. That's a lot of work behind that. So our next one, I did allude that we were going to talk about private foundations. And so alongside public foundations, there are private foundations. This slide outlines the types of private grant makers that exist. And within private foundation umbrella, there are private foundations and corporate foundations. So on the right side of the screen, you have corporate foundations. Think about this in terms of banks, public utilities, industries who benefit from being associated with your organization. A corporate foundation are required to disperse 5% of their cash investment income annually. So your relationship as a nonprofit or as somebody who's seeking funds benefits them. They have to give out funding. They use to fulfill corporate mandates or requirements. They support that shows their support in the community. So there's a public facing piece to this. It's not just marketing, as some people like to call it, but it really shows a commitment to the community. So you see the example on here is State Farm Foundation. That could also be Allstate has a foundation, and it highly favors organizations. These corporate foundations favor organizations who have engaged local branch employees. So for example, RDI has been trying to get a grant with a local bank, Umpqua Bank, and because we don't have one of their branch employees on our board or in a committee that we have, they have a tendency to not grant our request because those branch employees are not um, involved in our organization. Excuse me. Talking a lot more than usual because Jimena's not here. Um, so for corporate funding, really think about local banks, like I said, utilities, where are the things that where are the corporations, Walmart is another one that could really help, but their community profile will be raised by helping your nonprofit, but also they have a mandate to share it. So the other side of the grant world here is the private foundation. And again, they are also required to disperse 5% of their cash and investment. I sit as the past chair of a private foundation in Latah County, where I'm based, and we are every 6 months we meet and be like, how are we going to distribute these funds locally to the region that we serve? Most of private foundations do not operate programs outside of grant making. They don't have the capacity or the overhead to do more than just grant making. It usually has a board of trustees and sometimes no staff at all. So if you're ever applying for funds, often you'll see a comment on their site that says, we don't accept phone calls because we have no staff. Or you'll send an email and get the bounce back that says, thank you for your email. Expect a response in 1 to 2 weeks because it's run by volunteers or a board of trustees. Typically, a private foundation has one major individual or a family contributor. You may have heard of like, I don't know, the Bezos Foundation, that even though it's kind of corporate, is still a private foundation being funded by one particular example. That is a very big example. Some of you in Oregon and Idaho and Washington will have smaller examples to look at, like the one I serve on called the Latah County Community Foundation. Um, that one was funded by one person 20 years ago, and we are still working on the corpus of that. And then there's no standard application. So private foundations can have ask whatever questions they want to do a grant. It can be online, it can be emailed, it can be mailed, and every group is a little bit different. So while these two slides really focus on grants specifically, I want to remind you that there are many other types of fund diversification besides grants. And we talked about that in one of the earlier sessions. And to really consider how you mix grants in with donations or sponsorships or program fees or entry fees for events, contracts. What are all of the different ways you can diversify your funding? Because flexibility matters. And grants tend to be restricted on specific programs, whereas donations are not. Any questions or thoughts before I move on a little bit? Anyone or anybody want to share some ideas? Ooh, Joanna, you asked a great question, and I'm going to talk about no unsolicited grants accepted. We'll talk about that in about 3 slides. Okay, I'm going to keep moving on. So what I want to talk a little bit about is the reality of corporate giving in rural. Foundations versus corporate, this is just a good way to see how they interact with each other. But often in your community will only have a few large employers who are capable of corporate giving. This may look like I said, Walmart, Home Depot, if you have those, could be a Safeway or an Albertsons company, or trying to think of the ones that are in my community. We just got a Target. So there are these corporate foundations that happen to be, but they tend to be in your small communities and rural spaces. You don't have a lot of them. So the question really is it worthwhile to focus on these sources? And this is a rhetorical question for you to kind of go back and think about is like, do I really want to focus my energy on building corporate foundations or building those requests? And if not, how do I want to use my time? So I am going to move on to talking about finding funders and to get to Audrey's question about how do you find funders or how do you build those relationships or figure out how to get on those email lists. So let's get real about finding funders. The biggest thing is awareness and knowledge, and really the open internet can be a solid source for grant research. When you are looking for funders, um, what I would encourage you to do, so I sent you a list of potential places to find funders. It was pointed out to me that one of them has closed or is defunct. So thank you for doing that due diligence and finding that. And if there might be some that are missing from that page as well. But when you're going to do research, one thing you can do is Google it and just add keywords into your combination for your city or your local business names or foundation, community giving, grant, philanthropic dollars. Um, and so that is a good place to start in terms of finding funders. The other things you could think about is go to your local library, and often the library will have resources for you to access funding opportunities through some of the paid resources like Candid, though I don't think it's called Candid anymore. Can't remember what it's called. If somebody remembers what it's called, post it in the chat. Or maybe it is. Now I got confused. But there are other sources like grants, paid resources that local libraries often buy the subscription to, and then you can go in and use them. I have another slide that talks a little bit about that. Rural funding options are hard because we are underfunded. Rural is underfunded. For every $7 that goes into an urban space, rural gets $1. And so it is the reality of living in rural is funding is not as accessible, particularly in the corporate world. But really, it's about building local relationships with your local community foundation or regional community foundations. So some opportunities you find will look really promising, but won't be worth the pursuit. Um, Unfamiliar grants need to be vetted. So if you're finding funders, you type something in, you go to NAO's website, Nonprofit Association of Oregon, and they have the list of potential funders or the list of opportunities, and you're pursuing it, and you're like, oh, this looks really great. I'm going to apply for this. And you go and you apply for it, but you didn't do the research on it. You didn't vet it out. You may have just wasted the time or used the time on trying to get a grant that you may not be successful with versus taking the time to really read through the funder website. We'll do an activity in just a little bit that helps you, that challenges you to look through a funder website and answer some questions. So what I'm really saying is when you have a new grant or an unfamiliar grant, you need to spend a lot of the time before applying. This looks like researching their website, reading if you have access to minutes from their meetings, reading some of those. Look up their 990 tax form. Where are they giving money out? What does that look like? You can research this for free, info for free on GuideStar or Candid. But some of it's not always free. Grant Station is another one that you can get that information to. And always check their geographic reach. That's right, Joanna. So when you are doing the research online, encourage you to look at news releases or social media posts about their past funding. What are they looking at? So for instance, we have a funder that we've been working with in Washington called the Medina Foundation. And we went to go look at applying for next round. And all of a sudden there's this like, oh, we're sunsetting our organization. And here are the things that our focus is on. Sunsetting organization means they're closing closing the foundation. And so they're in the process of determining where those funds are going to go to. And we did not do our due diligence early enough to find that before they closed the applications. And so when you're doing those that research, really look at Facebook posts, social media posts, Instagram, news releases. The other thing I like to do when I'm looking for new grants that benefit a specific community or work that I'm doing is I look at community events. Who are supporting these community events? Is it being funded by a regional grant funder? Is it being funded or sponsored by community groups? And not to be competitive to them, but just to see where are some of the energies in this community going. And of course, last but not least, is ask your network what they know about funders, what they know about particular grants that are coming available. This could be your board members. It could be other donors that you have or partners. It could be RDI. You could reach out and be like, hey, what do you know about this funder? And I can't find the information. What can you help me? Or other volunteers. So they may have key information. We saw this slide last time that talks about the different types of grant funding. I'm going to remind you of them. You have the program. This is very specific to a program. You have capital, which builds physical and infrastructure, and it's a long-lasting asset for your organization. Capacity building grants. This is all about knowledge and skills for your staff. And then general operating, which is the unicorn of all unicorns and grants, is unrestricted grants that can be used towards any ongoing regular expense. So when you are reviewing foundation websites or other grant or corporate foundation websites, be sure to know what types of projects that they fund. I think this was in a grant handout to you. It's all types of grant opportunities. Some requests are ineligible for grant funding, and the big thing is check the funder's profile. Most funders do not fund all categories. Most funders are either capital or program or capacity building or a mixture of those. Rarely do they fund all four. Some funders, and mostly government funders, honestly, change their funding requirements regularly or based off of the money they have available. So there's some commonly unallowable costs that include, I see this almost in every grant I've ever applied for, is debt reduction or reducing a deficit. Most funders don't want to fund that. Requests for-profit organizations, most of the private foundations that we work with, those pieces, you have to be a nonprofit. You cannot be a for-profit organization. Fundraising events or campaigns, rarely do I see funders to give money for these types of things. They might sponsor an event, but it would come from their own unrestricted dollars, not necessarily from their foundation corpus or from their foundation dollars. Pass-through funds, this could be like you got money to give to other people. Many grant organizations don't allow for that. And anything to influence legislation or lobbying. Really, it's about getting to know the funder and understanding where are they focused. So we're going to do a little activity. You're tired of hearing me talk. So I'm going to send you into some breakout rooms, or Alexis is. And what you're going to do is do some funder research. You'll be in a room with about 4 or 5 other people for about 10 minutes. When you go into a breakout room, it'll say the RDI host is inviting you to blank breakout room, and we assign you funders. So maybe Alexis will read them once, because she's the one who set them up once we get to that. So be sure to look out for what that funder is. But research your assigned funder for the example. What is their geographic region? What do they care about? What is their mission? What kinds of things do they fund and how much, and what are their timelines? We will ask groups to share what you found after breakout rooms. So, Alexis, what funders did you assign?
There's a Satterberg Foundation, Roundhouse Foundation, Pacific Power / Pacific Corp Foundation, Walmart Foundation, Spark Good Local Grants, Horizons Foundation, and Banner Bank Foundation.
Okay. So when you get invited to a breakout room, it'll tell you which funder you're using. If for some reason you get into your room and nobody noticed which funder you are, reach out or send a message to the main room and we'll let you know. Does anybody have any questions? Okay. So overall, just as a reminder, geographic region, what do they care about? What is their mission? What kind of things do they fund and generally how much? And what are the timelines? When are the grants due? Okay, we'll see you in about 10 minutes. Bringing the other team groups back in a second. Okay, welcome back, everybody. Like I said before we went into the breakout rooms, we are going to have you report out on your group, on your funder. Does anybody want to go first?
I guess I can go.
All right, Tatiana, tell us what
Yes.
funder you had and what you learned.
We were looking at the Roundhouse Foundation, and it was very great because one of the participants in my group was a beneficiary of one of their grants, so that was exciting. This foundation supports projects in rural Oregon. I really apologize, my work phone is ringing. They support opportunities in rural Oregon, including tribal communities. Their mission is to support projects for arts and culture, environmental stewardship, social services, and education. And the person in my group, he was saying that they also have a strong focus on supporting youth activities. They have different types of funding. It looks like they do have a small grants program that it's for grant requests between $500 to $2,500. Then they do have other types of proposals for grants requests between $2,501 and $30,000, with a median award approximately of $20,000. And then they have capital grants for building maintenance, new construction, and vehicles, and those are anywhere from $25,000 to $100,000. Their timelines, it looks like they do have application periods that are open twice a year, a spring and a fall cycle. And for the type of grant, that for each one of the categories, there is slightly different variations of the application periods.
Wonderful, great. Was any of the information hard to find?
I was able to locate it quite easy because I do have a separate screen over here that is very large. But honestly, their page is organized very easily I've never heard of this foundation. So being able to locate that information in such a short amount of time, I think their page is very user-friendly.
Amazing. Awesome. Thanks so much for sharing, Tatiana.
Thank you.
What other group would like to share?
I will.
All right, Joanna.
We had Banner Bank, and 3 of the 4 folks had never heard of it, even though it seems to have a fairly large presence in the Northwest. Their site wasn't the easiest to find information on. It took a while to determine just even when their application window was, and all we did find when it closed. We never did find when it opened.
Oh, interesting.
They do support housing, financial education, youth development, and some other programs along those lines. Being a financial institution, they're really supportive of that kind of aligning their own employees as volunteers with different community groups that support housing and shelter and things like that. As I say, it wasn't the easiest to find information. You have to go through a screening process, and then once you are admitted, you then have to open up an account and go further with that. So that's what I took away from that.
Great. Thank you so much, Joanna, for sharing with us. How about somebody from the Satterberg Foundation?
I was going to defer to Erica if she wants. If not, I will talk. She's being very quiet. The Satterberg Foundation, Erica? All right, I'll talk. Satterberg Foundation is really focused on just racial justice, communities that are with a lot with minorities. And they seem to be in both urban and rural areas. The reason I wanted Erica to talk is that she's from Ontario and a very diverse population. I'm from Elgin, and we have not a diverse population. So, and I'm in a museum. So the Soderberg Foundation might not be something that the museum would be able to get a grant from, but Erica from Ontario should probably stay in touch with the Soderberg Foundation on this one.
Yeah, so we are just talking about, when looking at grants, and there's going to probably one that we could keep in mind is really what we took from it. And so just, looking more into, the requirements and how that would work. And so as he was saying, or Debbie was saying, that it might not work, for her.
Right. Does the Satterberg Foundation serve Oregon?
No, it doesn't. It's actually I believe it's in
It's in Washington.
yes, it's in Washington, Seattle, I believe.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The reason I thought they might is because I think they funded something in Arizona. So I was kind of under the impression maybe they are broader than just Washington, but I could be wrong there. We didn't have much time to really, it was hard to find the information quickly on the website.
Yeah. So each of these funders, you'll see a kind of a theme of like from the Roundhouse, which all of it's laid out there, and because they are a public or a private foundation, to Banner Bank, which is a corporate foundation, and then Satterberg, which is also a private foundation, but a little bit different way. And we'll dive a little bit more into like ease and how you approach those funders that find it's hard to find the information. Before we do that, how about Walmart? Speaking of a corporate foundation, somebody from the Walmart group?
So that one's me. Walmart, their page is very direct and their website is very direct. So it's made it kind of easy to find information. They take applications and review them on a quarterly basis. So one just ended actually on the 15th, so yesterday. So the new application period is from November 3rd to December 31st. One thing that I thought was really interesting that you don't see very often is it says that you can have a maximum of 25 applications where they're pending or approved status per organization at any time. And I feel like almost every other grant that I've looked at, it's like you can have one application in with them, or like it's either in or it's approved, and it's usually like for a year or something like that. So that 25 is definitely a big number. Another thing is pretty much anybody can apply for this this grant funding. Like, so 501c3s, government entities, schools, or church or other faith-based organizations that are helping the community. So I guess not everybody, but a good chunk of people. Their grants go anywhere from $250 to $5,000. The one thing that was kind of hard to find is it says that grants are awarded through an open application process to eligible organizations serving the same service area that the facility they're requesting funding from serves. But it doesn't give you like a mileage area. So being in that rural area, like for all of the grants I've applied for things like this, we usually can't because we're 36 miles from all of our stores. And we usually have to be within that 30 miles. but this isn't giving anything specific like that. As much as I dig in, I can't find how they gauge if it is serving the same service area
Right.
as that store. So that part was a little hard because it doesn't have a direct answer on it. And so there, you have to have a good Spark Good account on Walmart's website. And then you have to also be verified by Walmart's third-party verification before you can do this
Yeah.
grant. So
How would you go about finding that information about region?
I have been searching and searching since I saw that, and I'm really struggling. Like, I've even just taken that specific thing and put that into Google. I've looked through everything on their website, put it in the search bar on their website, and I can't find it. So I feel like the next step is to try to find like a contact information to be able to reach out.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Kaylee. That was great.
Yeah.
So I think we have the Pacific Power left and Horizons Group.
I can talk about Pacific Corp.
All right. Thanks, Taylor.
Yeah, no problem. They have education and STEM grant, community enhancement grant, environmental respect grant, arts and culture grant, and safety wellness grants available. And they also have the grants cycles and timing correlated with each one of those grants, posted very easily. Up to $10,000 is their most, but most of the grants are between $2,000 and $5,000. The thing that I would say about Pacific Corp that I've run into is that they are not a power provider for our area. So they would not, we would not be eligible for these grants. And they do have a map that's available to show their service areas to make that kind of easy. So you don't end up wasting a lot of time going through that part. You do have to apply and register to apply. And they've awarded over $13 million to nonprofit organizations in the last 5 years, it says.
Do you think the information was approachable or kind of hard to find? Did you and your group have to do some digging?
It seemed fairly easy. Just Googled Pacific Power grants and then kind of took me to the community foundation page and was able to dissect everything I needed out of that.
Yeah. Great. Thank you so much.
Yep.
And the last one I think is Horizons.
Yeah, so we had an interesting experience with this in our group. Everybody Googled it and we came back with 2 different foundations. And we were kind of like, okay, well, you take one and I'll take the other. So the one that I chose, and then I'll let my partner speak on the one that she chose. I picked horizonsfoundation.org, which is focused on making grants for the LGBTQ community in the San Francisco Bay Area. So depending on, and they're very clear about that, like there's like a 9-county region that qualifies there. So depending on where someone's located and what their work is, this would either be a perfect fit or a very like, don't try this one kind of thing. I guess we were imagining a scenario where our board president just sent us an email in all caps that said, check out the Horizons Foundation with no other context. And then left us to go do the research on it. So the grants that they do make, it looks like they've got multiple cycles a year and fairly robust dollar amounts. 25 to 30,000 is their average for their community grants. They've got like a safety and security fund that they give out and a statement that says, we don't give grants for sponsorships, but click here if you want to learn about sponsorships. So like they do that too, just through a different mechanism.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You caught on really quickly to the play here is like what happens when a board member or volunteer or somebody's like, check out this grant that I just found, and you don't have any information, and so you start looking at like, oh, they serve California and we're based in Oregon, or it's not in our service region. Who was your partner and did the other Horizon? Foundation.
So that
Uh,
was me, Jody Westerberg. And I apologize. We have a new building going up next door, and I'm living in an earthquake zone right now. So
Oh, I'm
there's
so
a
sorry.
constant state of they're compacting the ground right now, and so
Oh,
everything is, yeah, it's an interesting day. So I apologize if there's a lot of noise in the background. So the other organization is Horizons Foundation Washington, which only serves this community in Washington State. They have an interesting process. There isn't an application. You submit a letter of inquiry, and then they review your letter of inquiry. And if they like what you have to say, then you are invited to submit a synopsis of your project. I couldn't find any kind of dollar amounts as far as what they grant. I was trying to find ways to dive in deeper, and there really wasn't a whole lot on their website as far as that. If they like your synopsis, then you can submit a full application. There are no deadlines on the applications, but it looks like they review things and then grant them on a yearly basis. And then you can only have one grant in process per year, and you have to wait another year before you can submit anything else. So yeah, that's about all I could find on that
and
one.
you had said that that was for kind of like environmental, but like
Yes, yes, they were
that kind
looking
of
for,
approach to.
yeah, so they said it was basically their mission was about the environment, but then they had subcategories for social services and arts and culture. And then when I went back and looked at the mission statement, it sounds like they believe that arts and culture and social services help make their community a healthy and thriving and sustainable ecosystem. So that's how they kind of tied all that in together. So when you're first reading it at first glance, you think, oh, these are just environmental grants. But then when you start looking at it deeper, you see that, oh no, there are some for arts and, social services, things like that. So it sounds like they have a pretty diverse, system that you can apply for, like lots of areas, but you don't get that just on first glance at their website.
yeah. Thank you, Jody and Amanda. And brilliant. It was what you see here is as everybody's reporting out, like just the different levels of the access to information or different levels of different types of grants and how to get those grants. So Jody's was, thanks Amanda for being here. What Jody was talking about is like there's this letter of interest. Like we're open or letter of inquiry, send us an LOI, and if we like you, we will open up another opportunity. There's these levels of like, well, if you like the synopsis, then maybe we'll give you money or open up another layer of application for you. Versus the Roundhouse Foundation or the Ford Family Foundation or the Oregon Community Foundation for that matter, like there are open grants and it's very transparent. So like, what other funders are you typically working with? Let's brainstorm for the group and then type them into chat. And what we can do is we'll create a list that we'll put in the follow-up email about here are all of the funders that you're working with. So, or if you have are any of these funders new? Somebody said Banner Bank was new to the group. So if you have any funders, as we continue, type them in the chat. We'll send them out. As we all know, funding begets funding. So let's share the wealth and get people moving forward. Speaking of sharing, I'm going to share my screen. How funny am I like that? Alexis is probably sick of me. She has to put up with me all the time. You guys only have to do it once a week for only 5 weeks. Okay, so this was our questions. I want to get to this question about unsolicited proposals. Somebody put in the chat a question around, I don't understand. They say no unsolicited proposals, but yet there's still an LOI or we want to hear from you. So surely, like we saw, actually, Jody mentioned, is like there is an LOI process. Now, they didn't say unsolicited proposals. And what that means is you are not allowed to send in a proposal without permission. And most foundations, upwards of about 75% of foundations, do not accept unsolicited proposals. But many do realize this, since there's a vast majority of them by nature will not have a website, they won't have an online presence, or otherwise be fundable other than the typical 990 search. So if you happen to run across an organization that says no unsolicited proposals, what can you do? Really, it's kind of up to you to try and judge how far you want to be. Like if you find a foundation or a funder who's like they fund your region, somebody else got funded by them and shared the knowledge, and you're like, wow, it sounds like they would fund my program. Our mission aligns with their mission. They're funding the same region we're in. Like all of the universes align, and you go to find them and it says unsolicited proposals. So what do you do? How do you judge what to do? The question is like, how closed is the door? And so you can, oh, thank you for all the funding sources. When you see that unsolicited proposal language, some things you can do is there an email that you can send some introductory material to? So, hi, I'm Christine from Rural Development Initiatives. I stumbled across your website. I see you have unsolicited proposals. Can I send you some information about our organization? Don't automatically send it because they'll just ignore it. But ask them permission. Can I send you some information? The Lore Foundation, that serves very specific communities, is one of those organizations that's like, we do not take unsolicited proposals. But what I've done in the past and successfully with them is just sent them ask them, can I send you information? And then had a conversation after that. If a foundation suggests that you contact a program officer before applying, reach out to the program officer before applying. They will save you so much time and energy by if you have a 30-minute conversation with a program officer. This is what we're interested in. This is our project or our program. Here's how we anticipate this working. Does this align with your funding? And if they say, no, I don't think our foundation will fund that, you just saved yourself 6 months worth of work in a 30-minute conversation. Now, on the flip side, to say, oh yeah, that's a great idea. I think our trustees would really much be very interested in this. Then you've done due diligence by creating a relationship with your program officer first and starting to build trust between your organization and the funder. They usually, most foundations that have staff, like a program officer or an executive director, really like having those initial conversations to see if you meet qualifications. And it's, like I said, it saves everybody's time. If you get on the website and it says there's no contact information, or if the website says application by invitation only, you could hunt down some email in a press release or in a news article or somewhere else publicly and send an introductory email, kind of like an unsolicited proposal, but be careful not to be too persistent because that can look negatively on you. Or you could ask around, do you know anybody using your social network, virtual and in-person social network, to figure out what is happening or how to get connected with them. I can't remember who said it in the chat, is this like, they often say no unsolicited proposals, but we'll take an LOI. What that really is, and how I understand it or how I've experienced it, is we don't want to sift through all of we don't want you to send in a full proposal, but we're curious about the work that you're doing. So send us some like 1 page or 2 pages about the work that you're doing, and maybe we'll open up the LOI. Okay. So how do you cultivate those relationships? So let's say you've reached out to the program officer, like the funder suggested that you did. How do you cultivate a relationship with them? Building relationships with and partnerships with funders really helps them to be aware of your work and of the work that they are doing and how they align. and puts them in a position to advocate for you. So you want to build a relationship and cultivate that partnership together. So ways you can do that is how to get to know them, connect about your idea, incorporate their thoughts if they're like, hey, I think this is a good idea, and maybe to make this a stronger proposal, you might do X, Y, and Z. Incorporate those thoughts because they're going to be able to advocate stronger for you. Do not underestimate their priorities or the funding priorities or the funding climate for that matter. Funding climate changes every year, and we are in a very sticky funding climate scenario right now. So if their priorities are youth, my first question to them is, how do you define youth? Because if their definition of youth is 0 to 10 and your definition of youth is 18 to 24, then their priority does not align with your priority, even though you both use the word youth. So understanding what language looks like with them is really important. You submit your proposal, prepare for a site visit if that is necessary with your grant, and you do this with your board members or clients or volunteers. You don't do that in a vacuum by yourself because many voices can bring really great stories. And you want to maintain relationships and share your successes. We received a grant last year from an unexpected, unsolicited from our point of view. We didn't solicit this grant, but somebody saw the work that we were doing through other funders, and we're like, hey, we really like the work you're doing. Can we, we're going to give you some grant dollars. And I reached out to them. It's been a year, and I said, hey, I'd love to share with you what RDI has been doing with those dollars. It's not required of us to do it. We don't have any reporting requirements at all. But I want to maintain the relationship because I want to get those dollars again. And I want them to feel comfortable that they've made a sound investment in what RDI is doing. Think about what else. And what that really builds is this idea of trust-based philanthropy. I think I said that, or Jimena said that in an earlier session. And this approach is becoming more common. It definitely kickstarted in about 2021 and is really just continues to be in this trust base. It's when a funder says, the example I just gave you is a perfect example of trust-based philanthropy, is a funder says, I trust that you know what you're doing. I'm not going to micromanage you, or I want you to go do good work. So here's some funds and report back if you want to. We're moving towards more of this trust-based. You as the organizational volunteer, board member, executive director, you are the expert when it comes to your organization, not the funders. And they need to trust that and trust that you're going to do the best with those dollars. And what I would end on, particularly this slide, is be prepared for when the program officer calls or somebody from the organization for the site visit, or for any of the time that you have a conversation with them, so you can thoughtfully answer questions. Any thoughts or questions on that? Well, I alluded to it on building partnerships or building good relationships with funders. So we're going to dive deeper into that, is building partnerships with funders or regions or regional groups as well. So a well-structured partnership can strengthen your organization, your projects, and ultimately all of your funding requests. So let's see. So what are the benefits of partnerships? Benefits can look like you shared expenses and you're sharing resources, you help reach new populations, you're sharing best practices and ideas, you're really kind of building capacity. We talked about capacity, I think at a previous session, and you may not have full staff and somebody may not also have full staff, but together, like, you could really build good practices and ideas together. You can reduce the redundancy and serve the community better and maybe fill some gaps in funding. Historically, foundations look at partnerships and how you work together with what's happening in the community. So there is this, like, are you working together to build synergy for the community, not just for your organization? What are some of the other additional benefits to partnership that maybe not be listed here? Or does anybody have a good story to tell about that illustrates benefits?
I think you would get some unexpected expertise from time to time by having partners. And I guess in quite waves from home, but in Central America or doing some work, it turns out that my daughter-in-law's sister got laid off at USAID and moved over to running research programs at the university in Guatemala City, and that she might be able to connect this group that I know with student test score data that they haven't been able to get in the past. So I've reconnected them, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah. That's like showing the unexpected expertise or just really building some connections is really helpful. Other benefits of partnerships. So I have an example is the Historical Society in Hermiston partnering with the high school to scan documents for a digital archive. So the high school has given them access to their copy machine. And now they don't have to duplicate a resource that already exists. They don't have to get a copy machine for the Historical Society. They're using the high schools. They also have expanded project awareness. The high school knows about it. Teachers know about it, not just the people involved, and have built a group who cares about what they're doing. So the question is, the Historical Society goes and decides to do some grant work, and reaches out to the high school to write them a letter of support. Do you think the high school will write that letter of support for them? I'm assuming people are nodding. I don't see very many videos. There we go. There we go. I was on the wrong page. There's some more faces. So yeah, they might. So another unintended benefit of partnership is you have this support structure there for you. And so you can get a letter of support, you can get testimonies, those types of things. Okay, so in a same type, in alignment with all of this partnership talk, there's different types of partners. So there's referral partners, this idea of organizations refer clients to one another services. So we have a referral partner with Washington Commerce. There is one of their program officers knows about our work, and he will often be like, hey, this looks like something that rural development initiatives can help you with. Let me refer you to them. There's the program and project site or delivery operations partner. These are people who work together to deliver the program, or work in the project site, that types of thing. So there's work for hire, operational partners, people who own the space or land or equipment or other resources that allow people to use or deliver those programs. So for instance, we have a partner that we up in Port Angeles that when we ever are working up there, they always offer their space. We don't have to pay the $1,200 rental fee that it would cost us each time. And so we're saving funds with that in-kind donation, but also they are advocating for our work. And the next on here is those advocacy. And really the different types of partners, all of these could be thought partners, other organizations who provide similar programs or share insights and just really build that unintended expertise like David was talking about. When you go into a partnership, something you should consider is there's some things you should consider. Concerns usually arise over ownership, who's in charge, who owns this, what are our responsibilities, and of course there's the scarcity of funding, resources, participants, or staff, or what is the competitive advantage? And some organizations may be nervous to deepen their partnerships because they are maybe they're small or they've been burned in the past by other partnerships. And a lot of this is there's a concern out of one organization taking over another's work. I'm sure you can all think of an example when that has happened. I did send an example in the email from the community-centric fundraising, and this lists many ways to develop authentic relationships by supporting other nonprofits. And just remember that the key here is to build authentic relationships and not extractive relationships. And it takes time. It is a slow drip and it takes that intentionality. Even if it's a small relationship or a small partnership, you still have to take the time to do it. So when you're planning for success with partnerships, you can encourage successful partnerships with really good communication, identifying what is the problem, what are we working on, what is our mission that we're working on together, really detailed who's doing it, who, what, when, where, how many, what's the timeline. If you are in a partnership that has a budget, really agree on that budget. Work together of how it does this benefit us, who's in charge of these dollars, what is the big benefit. The two pieces that I think people often forget is this check-in often piece. Having those open lines of communication, even if you send an email or a text of like, hey, this is what I just worked on. Are we still this align with what you thought? Or just follow up with the work that you're doing and not checking in, are they doing their work, but making sure that you are communicating your work with them. Steward the relationship with ownership and accountability. How are we working together? And then the one that I think we often forget is celebrate the successes together. So are you working on a grant together? When you hit that submit button, celebrate that. Hitting that submit button may feel small, but it's really big. It could be a $10,000 day because you hit that submit button after working together. So taking the time to plan and help each other and celebrate and making sure roles are clear can really ensure successful collaboration and successful partnerships. So we are going to put you in another breakout room. And what this is going to look like is we're going to divide you up randomly. So in your community development work, there are typical identified dimensions of a community. You see the 5 on here. Where does your organization fit? Are you in education? Are you in health and human services, economic development, arts and culture? And what sector are you closest to? If you can't see yourself in one of these, ask your partners, like, where did they think you are when you get into the breakout room? So think about other organizations who work in your community in the same sector. Who are those natural partners? So when you get in the room, introduce what sector you're in, and then talk about, have you partnered with other organizations in your sector? Or have you partnered with organizations in other sectors? And in what capacity and how did it go? So really you're having a conversation of when you've had really successful partnerships within, like if you're in the education field, where have you had other successful relationships or partnerships in the education field? And have you had any unique or innovative partnerships? I will show one example of what I mean by unique or innovative, and before we break out into breakout rooms. When I was an executive director with a nonprofit arts organization back in 2020, we were a movie house. We were a movie house and performing arts center. And in 2020, we weren't doing much of indoors in a historic building doing theater or movies. And so we worked with a local environmental center and did movies outside, outdoor movie night, because we had the resources in order to get the licensing for the film. We had the speakers and the projector and all of that to bring to an outdoor space so people could social distance, still have the social activity. And so normally that nature center is working in that environmental natural resources, and we were in arts and culture, but we were able to bring our partnership together and outline who was doing what. So that's an example of what an innovative or a unique cross-sector partnership looks like. Okay, we're going to send you into breakout rooms. And as a reminder, you are going to share what sector you're in, what organizations you've partnered with in your sector, And have you partnered with other sectors and what did that look like? Any questions? All right, Alexis?
Okay, rooms are open.
Sometimes, most of the time, really worth it, particularly in small rural communities. You need your partnerships to survive. Okay, so let's revisit the project charter. This is the piece that we've been working through each session. We discussed this in session 1 and 2. You created a summary statement and a budget. And so now you can add, what can you add to potential funders? We have a whole list of funders that we'll send out, but are there new ones that you can add to your potential funder list? Are there partners in the region that's like you have this idea and maybe there's somebody in the region that could help with that? So consider that as you're building your project charter, what are the things that we can add? This is our roadmap, the things of all of the who, what, when, where, why, and how, all of these things that you do for your grant. And where do you think funders and partners fit into these common proposal elements? Where do you think those go? You all must really like when I'm talking. Or we're tired and ready for lunch. So where these go is kind of all over the place. You can see in who it says partners and service area organization of the project is the where, and there's this impact and needs statement. It's like the why. So really partnerships and funders filter throughout this whole space, this whole roadmap. We are towards the end. We're ending just a little bit early, so there's time to answer these questions. What new knowledge or skills are you taking away today, or what is one thing you might consider doing differently? Feel free to place it in the chat or come off mute. I did want to share, as you're thinking about that, I did want to share a resource that RDI has, and it is the Pacific Northwest Rural Action Network. This is a Facebook group that we have been, we manage and we put on and we share information. It's just an information sharing Facebook group that you can post, anybody can post really, who's in the group about upcoming events, if you're hiring. We post a lot of resources in terms of funding resources. I think Alexis is putting the link in the chat. So if you are, Mark asked a really good question. Alexis is going to put the link in the chat so you can access this Facebook page. And it really builds the network that we have in the Pacific Northwest. So the question Mark has, are there any partners that are bilingual? Lots of Spanish speakers in rural Eastern Oregon. We do have partners, particularly funders that are bilingual. So the Ford Family Foundation has a bilingual arm. I believe the Meyer Memorial Trust and the Collins Foundation both have bilingual staff, and actually Kelly Nonprofit has bilingual staff. Kelly Nonprofit Association or Consulting, excuse me, Kelly Nonprofit Consulting has bilingual staff as well. So there are lots of ways to build that, but that's a really good question to ask, Mark, and anybody who are serving a high Latino population is, do you have bilingual staff that we can work with to help build that capacity or whatever it is that you're doing for that audience? A really good question. Okay, next for your homework, if you're choosing to do homework, look at the funding gaps that you've identified already. And do you know where to look for funders and how to meet those gaps? And we've walked through how to look for funders a little bit. Use your resources, Google, public library, board members, friends, other nonprofits. Those are all really great places to start looking for funding. And review your list of potential partners. What do you need to know about them? What questions do you need to ask? And particularly your potential funders. How are you going to fill the gap with those funding? And then consider your project charter. What topics do you want to make sure that we cover next week to make sure that your project charter gets filled? And before you tell me what topics you want to talk about, session 4, we will cover the components of a grant proposal and how to plan your grant, getting through those planning stages. We'll provide you tools, of course, as handouts and ways, and there'll be more breakout rooms. There'll be breakout rooms as always, to make sure that you are grant ready. So, sorry, that went too fast. So next week, make sure these are on your calendar. We are October 23rd. Kelly Nonprofit Association will be, sorry, I said it again. Kelly Nonprofit Consulting will be joining us next week to share more about the technical assistance and mentoring opportunity that they have available to you. And then session 5 is the best session where you get to meet the funders. We have confirmed panelists from the Ford Family Foundation, the Oregon Community Foundation, and the Reser Foundation coming to speak with you. So back to the question I had here is, what topics do you want to be sure that we cover next week? Because next week is the last week that we have with teaching and content. And if there's anything particularly interesting, either feel free to email me or put it in the chat or let me know after class. All right, as always, we want to thank our friends at the Ford Family Foundation for making this class possible, and for all of you for showing up today to learn a little bit more about grant writing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.